Pop quiz. What does anger issues, fight or flight, and emotional intelligence all have in common?
It might not be up there, but that's a damn good answer.
Well, that's exactly what I went to find out. And with the help of research from psychologist and author Dr. Daniel Goleman, a bunch of articles, and a few existential crises where I questioned all of human nature, I think I found some answers. But, like every good detective, we have to start with our very first clue. Emotions. Humans are emotional creatures. Emotions, in many ways, dictate our very experience of life. And for decades, the world's brightest scientists have debated and struggled to answer a fundamental question. How many emotions are there? Okay, wait. If you're trying to name all the characters from the Inside Out movies, just stop. Trust me, I tried that. But we need more tangible evidence if we're going to decode the human brain once and for all. Fortunately for us, scientists have created many theories. Quick, here's a cheat sheet. Learn as much as you can in 10 seconds. Clock starts now. If we cross-compare their research, we can find some similar patterns. Emotions such as happiness, sadness, fear, anger, disgust, surprise, and love are commonly seen as core pillars to the human experience. As for me personally, I'm going with the characters from Inside Out. If you have your own list, drop it in the comments below. Now, we know the immense physiological and psychological power that emotions contain, thus begging the question on everyone's minds. What happens when we lose control? Even though the fight or flight response is a pretty well-known concept, let's dig deeper. It's essentially a physiological reaction that highlights our brain's innate need to survive. Now, even though we know what it is, what exactly happens in our brain and body when this survival mechanism kicks into gear? Well, think of it as 3 stages. Okay, imagine you're walking in the woods, and out of the corner of your eye, you see a Demogorgon from Stranger Things. The alarm stage, or your threat detection system, activates. And here's how it looks inside. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, detects danger. It signals the hypothalamus, which acts like a control tower. Then, the hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system. Finally, the adrenal medulla, part of the adrenal glands, releases adrenaline and noradrenaline into the bloodstream. And here's the crazy part. All of that happens within a couple seconds. The effects? Our heart rate increases, breathing quickens, pupils dilate, blood is redirected from digestion to muscles. Glucose and fats are released for quick energy, thus leading us to stage 2, the resistance stage. At this point, your survival mechanism has been activated. Your body is continuously pumping stress hormones like cortisol to maintain a high energy state. And you've got a choice. Do you fight the Demogorgon or do you run? Either way, your body is funneling energy to survival, not digestion, not long-term repairs, just pure survival fuel. And while the last stage happens within a couple seconds, the resistance stage can last minutes, hours, or even longer depending on the stressor. Here's how it looks inside. If the threat continues, the HPA axis takes over. The hypothalamus releases CRH. The pituitary gland releases ACTH. ACTH then tells the adrenal cortex to release cortisol, the main stress hormone. Cortisol keeps blood sugar high, suppresses non-essential systems like immunity, digestion, and reproduction, and helps maintain energy. The body remains in a state of high alert, but now it's operating in a long-term fuel mode rather than an instant burst. Essentially, the brain and body are using everything in their power to increase your chances of survival. Now, unless you're that character that always manages to fall while running from death itself, you have somewhat of a chance. And finally, the exhaustion stage. Once the threat ends, the parasympathetic nervous system kicks in to calm the body. Heart rate slows, digestion resumes, and stress hormone levels drop. The important thing to note here is that if the stress continues too long, the body's reserves essentially get depleted. If cortisol levels remain high, the immune system is weakened, and our tissue repair is slowed down. Other symptoms may be high blood pressure, heart rate, mental fatigue, anxiety, depression, burnout. Essentially, this is where the term chronic stress lives. This system was designed for short-term danger, not long-term. Now, sometimes it is in our favor to relinquish control. In survival instances, we would only slow these processes down. But what about in modern instances? While we may not have demogorgons that we know of, we do have stressors. Things like money, work, relationships, errands, lagging Wi-Fi while playing a video game, stubbing your toe on the corner of the bed, stepping on a Lego. I think I'm getting sidetracked. Point is, these microstressors can add up, but it's probably unlikely that they will activate the brain's survival response. But imagine all of these little things were slowly eating away at you, and then someone cuts you off in traffic, or you accidentally snap at a loved one, or, in other cases, much worse. Haven't you ever wondered why this happens? Well, so did I. Why do we lose control? And how can we fix it? Remember the pop quiz at the beginning of this video? Let's run it back. Pop quiz. What does anger issues, fight or flight, and emotional intelligence all have in common? The answer? Drumroll, please. The amygdala hijack. Okay, so the amygdala is part of the brain's limbic system, which regulates emotional and behavioral responses. And then amygdala hijack, like the name suggests, is essentially a fight or flight response to stress. So the amygdala is essentially a cluster of almond-shaped cells located in the brain's base. And so humans have two, one located in each of the brain's cerebral hemispheres, deep within the temporal lobes. They define and regulate emotions, store memories, and attach those memories to specific emotions. So while they may only be a small part of the brain, they play an essential role to understanding human nature. By now, we know that the amygdala is responsible for activating the fight or flight response. And again, it doesn't require any initiative from you to do so. If it did, it wouldn't be as advantageous from an evolutionary perspective. But the important part here is that while in the past, real threats were what activated this response, the modern fight or flight response is more likely to be triggered by emotions such as fear, anxiety, anger, and aggression. Which again leads us to the amygdala hijack. Here's what happens. So the frontal lobes are these two relatively large areas located in the front of our brain. Technically, they're part of what's called the cerebral cortex, the rational part of our brain. This area of the brain regulates voluntary actions like reasoning, thinking, movement, decision-making, and planning. Essentially, the frontal lobes are rational and the amygdala is emotional. They balance each other out. Now, the prefrontal cortex, part of the frontal lobes, is primarily responsible for damping down the amygdala's impulsive response. It essentially allows you to evaluate your emotions and then use your experiences and judgment to consciously respond. These reactions are not automatic, like the ones generated by the amygdala. For mild and moderate threats, the amygdala may jump to the fight or flight response, but the frontal lobes process the information you're receiving to help you determine if the danger is real. If the danger isn't immediate, the frontal lobes can often override it and help you decide what to do in response to the stressor. But in the case of strong threats, not so much. As we keep saying, the modern human is more likely to experience psychological threats than life-threatening ones. And sometimes our emotions can bypass our rational thinking and trigger sudden, illogical, and irrational reactions, also known as amygdala hijacks. The term was coined by psychologist Dr. Daniel Goleman, author of the 1995 book Emotional Intelligence, where he found many cases where the lack of emotional control led to some terrible consequences, including, but not limited to, murder. So what's the takeaway? Learn to influence your emotions before they influence you. My goal for this video was to compact decades of science into one solid takeaway that could change the way you run your relationships, your business, and your life. That's Amygdala Hijack explained. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.